Hello, everyone. Today we're going to explore how to build a GraphQL API using Denodo. So to start, let's take a look at this GraphQL API in detail. So here on my screen, I'm using Postman, which is a popular API development environment. And you can see here that I have a GraphQL API. This is the endpoint here. GraphQL API is always used post. And the body of the post is going to specify what information I want back from the server. So here I'm asking for an object. That object is customer. I want all of the customers with last name Lewis. So that's this filtering clause you can see here. Then I've specified which fields I want from that object. So customer key, first name, last name. And then I've specified another object, the orders associated with that customer. And for those, I want the order number, the order date, and the total paid for that order. So this rather succinctly describes something which, if you're using traditional REST APIs, may be much more complicated to obtain, because you may have to make several calls, maybe even a multitude of calls to obtain this same information, because you might have to call one REST API endpoint to get a list of customers. You may have to filter it yourself on the front end because you can't filter it by last name on the back end. And then you'd have to loop through that list and one by one request all of the orders. That's something that typically you may have to do. At any rate, it can be much more simply and more flexibly described here. So that's what I want. And let's go ahead and execute that and see what we get back. So the response body is here. And there you can see I have a list of customers. I have here Carl Lewis and his two orders. I have Lana Lewis and her two orders, and so on. So I've got exactly what I asked for, formatted the same way. Okay, so that's what I built. Let's see how I built it. For that, I'm going to switch to Denodo Design Studio. So Denodo Design Studio is the full web modeling tool from Denodo, where you build not only GraphQL APIs, but a whole set of views that you can expose to different data consumers via different protocols. So GraphQL is but one possibility. You can also publish these views via traditional REST APIs, via OData, or you can go beyond the world of API and use, for example, ODBC, JDBC interfaces to connect BI tools, for example. The same views, but different access methods to execute them. And then what you do is you organize those in what you see here, which are what we call virtual databases. So a virtual database is really just a way of organizing your views and other objects. It doesn't have to be linked to any data source in particular. That's kind of the beauty of Denodo. And generally speaking, the first thing you do is you connect your data sources. So that's what you see here. For this demo, I have two different data sources. I have an Oracle, sort of a traditional relational database as a data source. I also have a data lake, which we'll see a little bit later. But when you want to add a new data source, you do new data source, and there you can see the different families of connectivity which are supported by Denodo out of the box. I like to say that Denodo covers everything from AS400 to Salesforce in terms of data connectivity. There's a whole lot of different connectors, and each time it's Denodo that knows about the different protocols and the different formats that these different data sources use, so that you can work with them in the same manner. So if we look at one, this is the Oracle data source. It's JDBC, quite simply. And once you've got the connectivity in place, Denodo can map any table, any view from this data source to a view in Denodo. So let's take a look at a view that's been built, the customer view, on top of a customer table in Oracle. So you can see here, the data, of course, is in Oracle. And all we have is this view in Denodo, this view that looks quite a bit about like the table. We have the customer key, we have the different fields, first name, last name, etc. One thing that's different, of course, is that we don't have varchar2 as a data type, which is very specific to Oracle. We have text. So the idea is no matter what the data source, we're working with the same types of data, which is important once you start combining and exposing that data to different data consumers. So I'm going to go ahead and execute that so we can see the data. So here it's come back. That's basically your select star to see the data. So that's pretty straightforward. But with Denodo, you can build views that are more complex. You can build views that are, for example, joins between different different views and different data sources, set operations like unions, intersections. You can select and transform data in different ways. And so my orders view, this customer order detail view, is actually a join view. So it's a little bit more complex. You can see here, first of all, that it has this sort of hierarchical structure to it. Know that Denodo allows you to go beyond what sort of relational or relational-like and actually build lists of lists and complex data structures in Denodo, which is going to be quite powerful when you're working with APIs. And other than that, it's a join view. So if I pass into edit mode here, you'll see what that means. It means basically that to build it, I first chose different views that I wanted to join together. So I have a sales, a web sales view, an item view, a date dimension view. They're all in Oracle. I defined the joins between them. If I wanted to add another view to this, everything here is visual. So I can define the views visually in this low code, no code environment. So it's important to know, and since I know this presentation is really for a developer audience, know that everything you build here visually maps 100% to our VQL, which is Denodo's ANSI standard SQL language, which is actually extended for virtualization. So that means that you can manage this SQL basically as source code, and that's important to know. This tool here as well, this Design Studio tool, will integrate with VCS solutions like Git. So that's important. Okay, that's the model. And then on the output, that's where you're going to define actually the different fields that are shown. So you see here the customer key, the order number. Those are things that you can add into the GraphQL expression at the beginning, and you can add new columns here. So for example, this order total, that's simply a sum of all of the individual item prices which are stored in the web sales table. Okay, so that's how this view is defined. Now let's see what happens when I execute it. So for that, I'm going to go back to summary, execution panel, and I'm going to execute the view. So what's interesting to note is that anytime you execute a view in Denodo, it's going to go through the Denodo optimizer, which is basically going to translate what you've asked Denodo to do into targeted queries to the different data sources. And it's going to do that in an optimized fashion, using strategies that apply to different data sources and their capabilities, and also to the volume and the statistics that Denodo will keep on the different tables and their content. So that means that whenever you execute a GraphQL query, you're not just doing a simple data federation, bringing back data and doing all the work on the Denodo platform. Actually, Denodo is using those different data sources intelligently. So here, quite simply, we're delegating everything to Oracle. So you can see that in this execution plan here, where you see the optimizer phases at work, and then down at the bottom, I can see the interaction with the source. So here I can see the select query that was sent to Oracle. Okay, but that's all happening behind the scenes. So now what I have here are my two views, my customer view and my customer order detail view. I'd like to combine them, of course, to allow API developers to, or the developers of my application that will use the API to combine the two together. And to do that, I use another object, which isn't a view. It's what we call an association. It's kind of the graph part, if you will, of GraphQL. It's the piece that connects different objects together. So I'll edit it to show you what it looks like. Here, basically, I've chosen the two views that I want to link together, customer order detail and customer, and I've defined a join between them on the customer key. So that's what you do here on model. On output, you define other parts of that relationship, most notably the cardinality. So which side is 1, which side is n, for example. And that's really important because that's going to inform the API and what we can do with it. Okay, so once these 3 things are defined, the 2 views and the relationship between them, well, in fact, that's all you need to do to start working with GraphQL. Denodo automatically generates the API that's necessary to query them both together. And to show you what that looks like, let's just go back to Postman. So there's my query that I ran based on those 3 objects. But here I can also get the schema, the complete schema of everything you can do with GraphQL. That's based on that API strategy demo virtual database. And that's a standard piece of GraphQL. It's basically the query that describes all of the different objects, the different fields, their types. One of the neat things about GraphQL is that it's strongly typed. And that means that contrary to REST, which leaves everything, the type has to be interpreted properly by a developer, which might, JSON is fundamentally a text, so you have to know what you're doing. Of course, this gives you guidance in terms of what should be interpreted how. So that is everything you've built in Denodo, automatically available via this API. Okay, so now let's imagine that we're in the process of migrating. We're in the process of migrating Oracle to our data lake. Well, how do we do that without breaking the API? Because it's really important to contain this technical migration on the back end and not impact the applications. You don't want them to have to change anything to continue to function. So let's go back to Design Studio and see how that's made easier with Denodo as well. So if I go back to my customer view here, let's imagine this the very first one. Interface views are kind of something that the developers understand sort of intuitively, because what they do is kind of like contract first development. You've separated the definition of the view, the outside way it looks to the world, with the implementation, which is where that data is actually physically located. So today it's physically located in Oracle, okay? But let's imagine I've moved that now to the data lake, and I've got a view here, which is the same data, but read from Presto. So I'm just gonna change the implementation. And once I've changed the implementation, here it found the mapping based on the naming convention, but you can also basically map things. If the names of the columns aren't exactly the same, you can map them within the model here. Once I've saved that, everything that was built with that view is going to automatically be updated. So I don't have to do anything else for my API now to work on my data lake. Let's go back to Postman, re-execute. And so you can see here that, first of all, the API continued to work exactly the same way, but the data here are from the data lake. In fact, you can see that they're slightly different because they don't return the customers in exactly the same order. I don't have exactly the same list in both places. Here, Thomas Lewis is the first one who shows up. So that's how you can really easily use Denodo, not only to build APIs, but to manage them, to modify backend technology, continue to evolve your IT organization in a way that really gives you a lot of flexibility. So thanks a lot for your attention. I hope you're curious to learn more. All of this is well documented on our site, on our website, which is open to the community. So have fun. Thanks a lot.